There are lots of urban legends in Jerusalem. It has to do with the Golden Gate and the fact that it is closed.
There are many myths and tales that surround the ancient city of Jerusalem, but one story stands apart, whispered for generations, laden with mystery and cloaked in reverence. It begins not with a king or prophet, but with a sealed gate, unmoving, silent, and yet profoundly loud in what it symbolizes. This is the story of the Golden Gate, the eastern gate of Jerusalem's old city wall, which has remained shut in stone for nearly 500 years, but now the silence seems to tremble. Why is this gate sealed? It's not simply because of time or erosion. No, this gate was bricked shut in deliberate defiance, sealed not by age, but by fear. Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent ordered its closure in 1541, fearing a prophecy that has since echoed through centuries, that the Messiah, Jewish or Christian, would one day enter through this very threshold. The gate's closure was meant to prevent that divine event. In other words, it was a human effort to resist a heavenly promise. For nearly 5 centuries, the gate has stared out across the Kidron Valley, facing the Mount of Olives like a sleeping sentinel. Behind its stones are buried the hopes of kings, the ambitions of empires, and the faith of millions. The gate has been wrapped in silence, stillness, and sacred significance. It has witnessed conquest, crusades, and conflict, but through it all, it has remained shut. And yet, the gate is more than limestone and mortar. It is a symbol, one that refuses to fade with time. But now something has changed, something quiet, yet seismic. Within the ancient walls, the gate, once a stronghold of silence, has partially opened, not in a blaze of ceremony, not with the arrival of dignitaries or generals, but subtly from the inside. And this shift, however small, has not gone unnoticed. This isn't simply an architectural update or an urban development quirk. For believers in both Judaism and Christianity, this development isn't just archaeology, it's the potential foreshadowing of prophecy. The gate, known also as the Gate of Mercy, holds immense spiritual weight. For Christians, it marks the path that Jesus took into Jerusalem before his crucifixion, fulfilling the words of Zechariah 9:9, which spoke of a king entering on a donkey. For Jews, it is the prophesied point of entry for the Messiah, who will restore Israel and bring justice to the world. For centuries, it has remained untouched. No tourists have wandered through it. No pilgrims have passed beneath its arch. Not even the wind has disturbed its sealed stones. But now, rumors swirl. Is the ancient gate, bricked up by empires and guarded by the dead, finally beginning to stir? If the ancient prophecies are true, this subtle shift may not be trivial. It may be divine. And if that is the case, then this isn't just an archaeological curiosity. It is the beginning of something far greater. Something eternal, something sacred. If this mystery surrounding the Golden Gate stirred something in you, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us, do you believe this is a sign or just coincidence? At first glance, the Golden Gate is little more than an old, bricked-up archway pressed into the ancient stones of Jerusalem's eastern wall. No signs, no guards, no fanfare, just silence. Yet within that silence lies one of the most powerful spiritual crossroads in human history. This isn't just another blocked passageway. It's a sacred threshold, long regarded as the prophesied entry point for the divine. Set in the eastern wall of the Old City, the Golden Gate, also called the Eastern Gate or the Gate of Mercy, faces directly across the Kidron Valley to the Mount of Olives. It doesn't welcome tourists or allow traffic. Wind doesn't rattle it. No footsteps echo through it. It is sealed, utterly shut, its doors closed with brick and mortar for nearly 5 centuries. But why? Because this gate bears weight unlike any other. The weight of prophecy. According to Jewish tradition, this gate is destined to be the entrance for the long-awaited Messiah, the Redeemer of Israel who will bring restoration and peace. In Christianity, it holds another level of significance. It is believed to be the very path Jesus of Nazareth took during his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, fulfilling the words of Zechariah 9:9. Behold, your king comes to you, humble and riding on a donkey. The moment Jesus passed through the gate, prophecy wasn't just recited, it was lived. This convergence of Jewish and Christian prophecy is rare and powerful. It has given the gate an almost mythical status, a physical representation of hope, destiny, and divine timing. But prophecy doesn't just rest on belief. It often stirs action, and that action came in 1541. That year, Suleiman the Magnificent, ruler of the powerful Ottoman Empire, sealed the gate stone by stone. It wasn't done ceremonially, it was done tactically. Some say it was out of fear that the prophecies might come true. Others claim it was to smother any Jewish hope for redemption. But regardless of motive, the effect was the same. The gate was bricked shut, its prophetic purpose locked behind layers of stone. To further ensure no priest, prophet, or messianic figure could ever pass through, Suleiman ordered a Muslim cemetery to be constructed directly in front of it. The logic? That no holy Jewish figure would dare defile himself by walking among the dead. A spiritual roadblock, placed where heaven was meant to touch earth. Yet centuries of spiritual momentum cannot be held back by bricks and fear alone. Because today, something is stirring. This long, silent gate, sealed by man to halt a prophecy, is once again in the spotlight. Not because it was reopened officially, not because it was torn down, but because something has shifted quietly behind the wall. And if the prophecies are true, that shift isn't political or archaeological, it's divine. Because when it comes to this gate, every movement might just be a message. The year was 1541. The empire was Ottoman. The ruler, Suleiman the Magnificent, a man whose ambition shaped cities and shifted borders. Yet among his many grand constructions, one act remains draped in mystery and whispers: the sealing of the Golden Gate. It wasn't done in honor. It wasn't decorated with ceremony or scripture. It was done in silence, and perhaps in fear. For both Jews and Christians, this gate isn't merely an architectural feature. It's a portal of prophecy, a spiritual hinge upon which the destiny of nations is said to turn. Jewish belief holds that the future Messiah, the one who will restore Israel and bring justice to the earth, will pass through this very entrance. Christians, meanwhile, see it as the gate through which Jesus once entered, fulfilling ancient scripture, and will enter again in glory at his second coming. Could it be, then, that Suleiman didn't simply close a door, but tried to shut down a prophecy? To some, the answer is clear. The Ottoman Sultan, fully aware of Jewish expectations about the Messiah entering Jerusalem through the Eastern Gate, ordered it sealed with stone. But he didn't stop there. In a calculated move, he commanded that a Muslim cemetery be established directly in front of the gate. This wasn't random landscaping. It was a spiritual blockade. In Jewish law, priests are forbidden from walking among graves. By placing tombs before the gate, Suleiman created a defiled threshold, an impassable line for any holy man. But prophecy isn't so easily cornered, and belief doesn't crumble under bricks. Centuries passed. The gate remained closed. Yet through wars, rebuildings, and resettlements, the Golden Gate remained untouched, as though unseen hands preserved its stillness. The more empires rose and fell around it, the more resolute it seemed to become. And then, something changed. For the first time in generations, news emerged that the inner chambers of the gate, long hidden behind layers of silence, had been accessed, not by generals, not by archaeologists, but by worshippers. Photos began to circulate. Videos quietly surfaced. Within them, people could be seen praying inside the vestibule, surrounded by ancient stone and echoing history. There were no trumpets, no public announcement, no flags or proclamations. Just quiet footsteps where once there had only been stillness. How? Why? Was it part of a restoration project? A lapse in oversight? Or was it something more? A subtle divine allowance, like a crack in a long-closed curtain letting in the first light of morning. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. A gate that had been closed for nearly 500 years was no longer entirely silent. And in a city like Jerusalem, that matters. Because in a place where stones speak and prophecy breathes, even the smallest shift echoes across generations. The stones of the Golden Gate are not ordinary. They bear the weight of prophecy. And perhaps the most striking declaration about this sealed passage comes not from history books, but from Scripture itself. Ezekiel 44:2 states with piercing clarity, "This gate is to remain shut. It must not be opened, no one may enter through it. It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it." Those words echo across time like a divine decree etched into eternity. The sealing of the Golden Gate was not merely a political act or a defensive measure. If Ezekiel is to be taken literally, then it was a holy boundary, a gate closed not by the will of man, but by the presence of God Himself. This verse reframes everything. If the Lord has passed through that gate, as Christians believe He did on Palm Sunday, fulfilling Zechariah 9:9 by entering Jerusalem gentle and riding on a donkey, then the gate, by divine command, was never meant to be reopened by ordinary hands. And yet, history tells a different story. A human one. In 1541, Suleiman the Magnificent sealed it shut, likely unaware that he might have simply been obeying a command already given by heaven. In attempting to prevent prophecy from unfolding, he may have inadvertently fulfilled it. This paradox is as poetic as it is profound. Time and again, men have tried to control what God has ordained. They have drawn borders with blood, silenced voices with stone, and reshaped sacred ground in the image of power. Yet the Golden Gate remains. Not because no one has tried, but because something has always pushed back. In 1917, during the final days of World War I, Ottoman leaders planned to demolish the gate. The order was issued, the moment chosen. But just as they prepared to act, British forces suddenly captured Jerusalem, halting their plans in a geopolitical shift that stunned the world. Coincidence? Or divine timing? And then, decades later, 1967, the Six-Day War. Israeli troops surged through the Old City. The Golden Gate was again within human grasp. Leaders debated reopening it. The tools were ready. The authority was unquestioned. But then came a voice, a respected rabbi, who delivered a quiet warning. Only the Messiah may open that gate. And so they stopped. This wasn't just restraint. It was reverence. a sacred hesitation, as if the very air around the gate demanded caution, awe, and perhaps obedience. For every moment that humans have come close to forcing this gate open, an unseen presence seems to have held it shut, as if to say, "This door does not answer to kings or armies. It answers to the one who entered through it once, and will again." Jerusalem's walls have witnessed war and peace, rebirth and ruin. Its gates have opened and closed with the rise and fall of kings. But one gate remains curiously untouched, the Golden Gate. And unlike the others, this one does not behave like a passage through time. It behaves like a symbol of resistance, not against armies or empires, but against time itself. Throughout the centuries, the other gates of the old city have been destroyed, renamed, rebuilt, or forgotten. Each has been reshaped by political tides and religious struggles, but the Golden Gate, it remains, sealed, silent, still. That silence is not emptiness, it's a statement. It speaks of something preserved, something guarded by invisible hands. For every era that tried to alter or interfere with this gate, something pushed back, hard. Like a spiritual boundary etched in stone, it defies tampering. Not one modern bulldozer has carved into its surface. Not one treaty has dared to include it in reconstruction. And yet, despite its defiance, something unexpected occurred in 2019. For the first time in centuries, the interior chamber, the inner side of this gate long hidden behind layers of sealed brick, was reportedly opened. Quietly. No grand announcement, no global headlines, just a whisper of change. Photos began circulating, blurry but telling. Worshippers inside, kneeling in prayer where no one had stepped for generations. Others suggested it was mere renovation, some kind of maintenance or cleanup effort behind the stone facade. But for those who watch prophecy like others watch news alerts, it wasn't about construction. It was about timing. Because if this gate was sealed in fulfillment of prophecy, and if it was meant to remain shut until the return of the Lord, then even the smallest shift carries cosmic weight. Was this just human action? Or divine permission? We must remember, the Golden Gate wasn't sealed simply to keep enemies out. According to Ezekiel, it was shut because God had entered through it. And if that's the reason, then any movement, even a subtle one from the inside, matters. In fact, it may not just matter, it may be a signal. Because this gate, more than any other, is a clock with no hands. It doesn't tick with seconds or minutes. It marks time with fulfillments. Every attempt to tamper with it has failed. Every plan to reopen it has paused. Every prophecy surrounding it remains untouched. Until now. The moment the interior chamber became accessible, even partially, a question reverberated through the watchers of prophecy. Is something stirring behind the stone? The answer may not be written in newspapers, but in the silence itself. Because sometimes prophecy doesn't arrive like thunder. It whispers through stone, and the whisper now is louder than ever. There are places in the world that resist being forgotten. The Golden Gate of Jerusalem is not just one of them. It stands as the most stubborn, the most spiritually immovable of all. For nearly 5 centuries, its front has remained firmly bricked over. No explosions, no political victory, no religious motivation has broken through. While empires have crumbled and borders have shifted, this single gate has refused to move. This is not for lack of opportunity. The British nearly dismantled it during their entrance into Jerusalem in 1917. They held power, had resources, and inherited Ottoman tensions. Yet, as if guided by an unseen script, the idea faded. In 1967, Israeli forces, having just captured the Old City during the Six-Day War, stood at the edge of decision. The gate could have been unsealed with ease, but they didn't touch it. Why? Because prophecy watchers and religious leaders understood something that politicians often overlook. Not everything is meant to be touched, even if it's possible. A highly respected rabbi warned the Israeli leadership with words that echoed like a final line in sacred theater. Only the Messiah may open this gate. And they listened. This wasn't bureaucratic hesitation, it was spiritual restraint. It was as though, in that moment, an ancient instinct reached into modern politics and held their hands back. Not by force, but by reverence. Even more curious is the story of the Muslim cemetery that was constructed directly in front of the gate during the Ottoman era. At face value, it was a defensive move, a belief that no Jewish priest or messianic figure would defile themselves by walking through a graveyard. But viewed through prophetic lens, it feels more like human effort trying to block a divine script. And yet, if the one who is to come truly is the King of Kings, what wall could stop him? What grave could hold back his path? What empire could deny him passage? Time and again, human hands have tried to control what prophecy declares, to rewrite sacred timelines with treaties, cement, or fear. But the Golden Gate pushes back, not violently, but persistently. Every historical interference seems to meet a mysterious end. Plans to demolish? Interrupted? Attempts to reopen? Paused? Intentions to rebuild? Drowned in silence. It's as if the gate is being held shut not by mortar and stone, but by something eternal. Something that knows the appointed hour and guards it with patient intensity. And now, with the inner vestibule awakened, quietly, softly, as if inhaling for the first time in centuries, the world is being offered a question it never expected to face in its modern age. Is prophecy on the move again? This isn't about politics. It's about patterns, sacred ones. And if we're paying attention, then we're no longer watching a relic. We're witnessing a countdown. There are places in the world where geography whispers prophecy, and in Jerusalem, that whisper becomes a thunderous echo. One of the most astonishing alignments in all of sacred history is found between the Golden Gate and the Mount of Olives. At first glance, it may seem like a simple architectural coincidence, a gate facing a hill. But to those who understand the prophetic narrative, it's a divine calibration carved into the very layout of the city. The Golden Gate, sealed in solemn silence, looks directly across the narrow Kidron Valley toward the Mount of Olives. This is not symbolic poetry. It's spatial prophecy. According to Zechariah 14:4, the Lord will return to earth by placing his feet on the Mount of Olives. The mountain will split in two, forming a path of escape and announcing his arrival. From there, the path flows straight toward the eastern gate, still sealed, still waiting. This is the same route Jesus of Nazareth took when he entered Jerusalem on a donkey, fulfilling Zechariah 9:9. He descended the Mount of Olives, crossed the Kidron Valley, and passed through the Golden Gate. That journey wasn't just historical. It was a map drawn in obedience to prophecy. And now, many believe, it foreshadows a second, greater entry. The placement of the Golden Gate is not accidental. It doesn't face Rome or Babylon or any worldly empire. It faces east, toward the mountain of return, the place where heaven and earth are destined to collide again. This alignment, so precise and so persistent through centuries of change, defies coincidence. Empires have risen and fallen. Borders have shifted. But the gate and the mount remain. Two sentinels locked in sacred gaze, marking a prophetic path not yet finished. To walk this corridor is to walk in the shadow of something greater, a return long foretold, and perhaps now closer than ever. Not every prophecy is wrapped in mystery. Some are etched into the land itself, waiting patiently for eyes to notice the alignment that has always been there. The Golden Gate doesn't stand alone in significance. It gazes directly across a narrow valley to another sacred giant, the Mount of Olives. At first glance, it's just a hill, crowned with olive trees and ancient graves. But this is no ordinary mountain. In the prophetic imagination of Scripture, the Mount of Olives is a stage, and what it looks upon is not incidental. According to the prophet Zechariah, the day of the Lord's return will begin here, with his feet touching the Mount of Olives. And when that happens, the mountain will split in two, not symbolically, but physically, creating a way of escape and marking the divine moment of arrival. Zechariah 14:4. This is not vague poetry. It is location-specific prophecy, with Jerusalem as the backdrop, the mount as the threshold, and the Golden Gate as the portal. Now consider the precision. The gate, the one gate chosen for divine return, faces that very mountain. The two mirror each other across the Kidron Valley, like ancient sentinels staring across time. It's as though the layout of the city itself was designed to anticipate this event. Not Rome, not Babylon, not even Mecca, the gate faces one direction only, the place of return. And this is no accident. When Jesus entered Jerusalem for the first time as the prophesied king, he came not with legions but with humility, riding a donkey, just as Zechariah 9:9 had foretold. But he didn't enter through a random gate. He came down from the Mount of Olives, crossed the Kidron Valley, and passed through the eastern gate, the same one now sealed in stone. That first entry wasn't merely a symbolic act. It was a fulfillment, a signal, a divine echo reverberating across centuries. And if that first coming fulfilled prophecy in perfect alignment, then should we not expect the second to be no less precise? That's why the recent activity inside the Golden Gate has alarmed many, not just scholars or theologians, but watchers of prophecy from around the world. For them, geography matters, alignment matters, patterns matter. And when something begins to stir in this sacred corridor between the gate and the mount, the faithful begin to watch more closely. Because if the Lord will return to stand on the mount and then pass through the gate that faces it, then everything in between becomes sacred ground. The road, the valley, the silence, it all forms a pathway of prophecy. This is more than history. This is architecture that breathes expectation. The Golden Gate has never looked west. It has never aligned itself with Rome or empire. It only looks east, to the place of divine descent. And so with every whispered report of activity within its stones, with every rumor of inner doors shifting, the alignment becomes louder, clearer, heavier. This is not a political arrangement. It is a prophetic calibration. Something set in place before the foundations of nations, and now inching once more into motion. Across millennia of belief, bloodshed, and borders, rarely has one place held the shared reverence of two great faiths. And yet, the Golden Gate, sealed and silent, stands as a point of convergence, not just of walls and geography, but of destiny. For the Jewish people, the Golden Gate, Sha'ar Harachamim, the Gate of Mercy, is the destined entrance of the Messiah, the one who will come to restore Israel, rebuild the temple, and bring justice to the world. It is a gate that represents hope deferred, a future still awaited with trembling expectation. For Christians, this same gate is already hallowed, not merely because of its future significance, but because it has already known His presence. It is through this very gate that Jesus of Nazareth entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, fulfilling ancient prophecy and setting into motion the events of redemption. But even more than a historical entry, the gate stands as the promised entry point of His return, not in humility this time, but in glory. And what's astonishing, perhaps even divine, is that both faiths await the same event, the opening of this gate to welcome the Anointed One. Though interpretations diverge in detail, the timing and location are shared. This sacred intersection is not a coincidence, it is convergence. The gate is a threshold of mercy, not wrath, of kingship, not conquest. Its very name in Hebrew, Sha'ar Harachamim, speaks volumes. Mercy, not vengeance, is what flows through its spiritual architecture. And perhaps that is the truest miracle of all, that two timelines, two theologies, two expectations can find unity in a wall of stone. It's here that the mystical becomes visible. While political lines shift and ideologies clash, the gate does not move. And now, with recent reports that the inner chamber has been quietly accessed, perhaps unintentionally, perhaps by design, the spiritual world feels like it's holding its breath. Is this mere restoration, maintenance, or something else? To the secular mind, it might seem like nothing more than stone and circumstance. But to those who follow the tremors of prophecy, even the smallest movement matters. Because if that gate is truly meant to open only at the end of the age, then even a crack in its silence sends ripples across eternity. And both Jews and Christians have taken notice. From whispered rabbinical commentary to international ministries watching Jerusalem's eastern wall, there's a shared sense of urgency, of watchfulness. This is not hysteria. This is hope. Hope wrapped in centuries of waiting. Hope carved into limestone and faith. Hope that walks not through governments, but through prophecy. Because when that gate opens, not metaphorically, but physically, everything changes. It is said that kings build gates to control who may enter. But this gate was not built by a king for power. It was sealed for something far greater. A moment when he who is worthy will walk through, not with army or sword, but with authority that transcends empires. What if the most important message of our time wasn't shouted, but whispered? In a world addicted to noise, we often expect the divine to thunder. But prophecy rarely operates on the terms of headlines. It moves like breath through stone. And now, the Golden Gate, sealed in silence for centuries, may be doing just that. Breathing. There has been no explosion, no dramatic unveiling, no camera crews swarming the eastern wall. Instead, there are rumors, movements, a shift, not in brick, but in atmosphere, a sense that something ancient is no longer asleep. And for those attuned to the spiritual pulse of Jerusalem, that subtle stirring is enough to awaken urgency. The scriptures speak of signs, not spectacles, of readiness, not recklessness. They tell us that before fulfillment comes, there will be trembling in the foundations, a rising of birth pains, and a quickening of time itself. Wars, rumors of wars, a world that grows colder, louder, more divided. And yet, in the midst of it all, stillness. The stillness of a sealed gate waiting on command, waiting on timing. Many wonder, is this that moment? Is prophecy aligning once more, not in the chaos of politics, but in the quiet choreography of heaven's design? Has the divine clock struck a hidden hour? For centuries, the faithful have watched Jerusalem, not just as a city of history, but as a compass of eternity. Now, more than ever, that compass is quivering. The world feels heavy with warning, disasters, spiritual drift, moral confusion, and in the middle of it all stands this gate, like a sentinel guarding the border between the now and the not yet. So the question isn't just if we believe. The question is, are we ready? Ready for what the opening of that gate could mean? For the return, for the reckoning, for the restoration. Because when prophecy begins to breathe, when silence begins to speak, the call is not to panic, but to prepare. If these signs move your spirit, subscribe now. Leave a comment. Could this be prophecy unfolding, or a warning we dare not ignore? Let your voice be part of this sacred dialogue.